everyone, welcome to Science Friday.
Here's some for E as well. The one on the top here is one of the ways that you can define E.
What makes a field more likely to have an unbalanced gender distribution?
So this can be like, in the case of this paper, gyrification or brain folds.
A neuroscientist started to look at the brain
as
because they're working too much. And they do that in a lot of ways, including taking their own lives. If anything in this wheelhouse is not your cup of tea, you have been warned. All right, I'm not going to graphically describe any of this, all right, but just know that it's going to come up.
All right, so without further ado.
All right. We're not going to read this all collectively. So, okay, y'all. So this first little clip, and there's a short URL on the side if you want to follow along. I'm going to move through about 25 slides, some of them somewhat quickly. If you want to look at things more closely, you can always do that. This is a testimonial given by Dr. Misao Miyamoto, right? Yeah. In 1994, he published this, but he got this information earlier in the 90s. Anyway, he changed jobs and was shocked, having come out of industry and then gone back, at the fact that people seem to revel in never resting. All right, the story here is of a guy who's retiring who is proud to say that he never took a day off in 30 years. Yeah, that's the right thing. Okay, go ahead. So this is sort of the problem that we're butting up against. I'm going to argue today there's sort of a capitalism problem and a culture problem that's driving this trend that we see that's overwork. All right, so, but you know, per Science Friday, this is actually a presentation about bad data. Okay, the data is bad for a few reasons. One, there are massive incentives for people to lie, and they lie very aggressively. Okay, we have, well, I'll get into it. Okay, there's also too much of an honor system in the reporting. There is no substantive penalty for lying about, if you know your company A and you tell the government this is how many hours we work, there is basically no functional penalty to lying. So people keep lying. Okay, and they also have the sort of politics fighting against overwork, clashing with the overwork culture, and this just turns into a mess. Go ahead. All right. So there are terms you've probably heard of related to overwork in Japan. Karoshi, all right, these are the characters if you care, literally excessive labor, death, okay? What this refers to is actually two different phenomena, all right? The more common one is this, heart attacks, strokes, and other physical ailments that come from you not sleeping enough. Oh, children who I know do homework at 4 o'clock in the morning, okay? But yeah, so that's, heart attacks and stroke is your most common things that I'll just put you out. All right, there's also this thing called kado jisatsu, which is overwork-induced suicide, okay? So stress gets so high that you just take your own life, okay? Both of these are counted in the data together. I will at times amalgamate them, at times separate them, I'll do my best. Okay, the issue is that one of the results of knowing this, anyway, this is one of the results, not the only result of what I'm going to be talking about, but if you do further reading, this is going to pop up a lot. Hit it again. Okay, so just giving you two quick examples of like what we mean when someone dies over work. Okay, so these names are obviously fake, but the data and stories are true. Okay, so for those of you who can't see, all right, Mr. A works at a snack food processing plant for 110 hours a week. All right, how many hours are in a standard work month, children? 108? No. How many? 160, 40 hours a week. So this guy's doing 3 weeks of work in one. Okay, what is happening?
Sorry.
That is not a moment to turn music. Anyway, that person died of a heart attack at age 34. I'm 34 years old. Okay? So, Mr. B, I'm not going to go through all these just two. All right, he's a bus driver, was a bus driver. He is approved for work-related, what's it? His death is actually sanctioned as an official overwork. Wow, can that echo minimize? All right, whatever. Anyway, his death is officially recognized by the government as a case of overwork. He's working 3,000 hours a year. All right, and I'll show you a chart in a little bit as to what that looks like. He dies at 37. Anybody here 37-ish? No, I'm not ish. Okay, all right. So the point I'm trying to make here is this is not something that happens to the elderly. Young people die. All right, I'm going to tell you a story about a 20-year-old later that dies because of this. Go ahead. All right, so here's the first bit of data. I created basically a chart that shows you what does it mean to work the number of hours we're talking about. All right, so here's your control, a standard 40-hour work week, 10 hours a day for 6 days a week, and then 12 hours for 6 and 7. So this right side is your death by overwork range. All right, so the way the chart works is this calculates all the hours you burn. I have roughly assumed you're sleeping 6 hours a day. That's not enough, children. Okay, and about 90 minutes a day for meals and doing grocery shopping. That's not enough, children. Okay, and also I'm assuming that we just are forced to take 10 mandatory national holidays, which is also not true. Even with all of that calculated in, if you're working this much, you have less than 5 hours a day that you're not laboring or doing chores. Okay, so if you're sleeping enough, you can watch one movie and then you have to pass out immediately. So no long hanging out in the bathroom or anything. All right, your shower needs to be like 5 seconds. Showers are not calculated into this. Okay, so this is a utopian set of data, all right? So if everything is working perfectly, you can have 4 hours a day, average, all right? But in reality, who has children here? Don't they take up time? Yeah, okay, so if you're this person, you have no time. You have negative time. You cannot finish everything. This person probably also. All right, but this is what just to show you what it means to work this many hours. Go ahead. Okay, so brief history lesson. Why the heck do we actually get to this point? So this problem starts in the late 19th, early 20th century. I'm not going to go back that far. I'm going to start in the 50s after the occupation. So initially, Japan is getting massive economic growth for this work level. I'll show you data on that in a second. All right, that's supported by a bunch of things I've noted here. All right, and it's routine for people to work 100 hours a week. And there's a commercial amphetamine industry supporting that. Okay, so people are literally on meth to get this done. Okay, I'm really glad that you came back from the East Coast on meth now. That's great. Okay, so now over time, the number of people that are doing that level of work will go down, but there's still a solid, say, 20 to 40%, depending on the month. All right, because you'll have things like reporting months and finance organizations, they get big spikes. Okay, that are still working at this rate. All right, Japan isn't even having a conversation about whether or not they should have a weekend until the 1970s. I wrote an article on this and published it with a publisher at Cornell if you want to know. Okay. So it is that debate is ultimately unsuccessful. They get a legalized, as in mandated by law, weekend. No one does it because there's no teeth for not following the rule. Go ahead. Okay, so this shows you the economic growth that we're getting. So initially we get double-digit GDP growth, which is very, very, very robust. But then the oil shocks happen, and we never fully recover from it. My argument to you is the work levels here averaged out, and the work levels here are the same, roughly speaking. Okay, we're in that 3,000 to 4,000 range for over a year. So that's a big difference in payoff for those of you for our economics nerds, yes? How does negative growth for working at 4,000 hours a week sound? Terrible, yes, okay, go ahead. Okay, so now to get into sort of the aggregated data. This is from the OECD. This shows, according to the official data, that we were working an average of 2,200 hours per week in 1970 across all industries, and that we're down below 1,800 now. What do you think the next slide is going to show you? That's not true. Okay, go ahead. All right, so this is another set of data that I've amalgamated for you. The Japanese government is good about reporting things in the most annoying possible way, so I've made it neat for you. So this tracks the reported number of hours worked by an individual in a given month. This is all the data from January over these years. So this should be slightly light because we just came off of a holiday. All right. So this is the paid hours, unpaid. Well, some of it will be unpaid. Okay, so if you notice, this goes up by a couple hours, which if you flip back real quick, that doesn't say that. Okay, go ahead. All right, but this number increases by almost 30%. This is overtime. Okay, now, I don't have a slide on this, but we have this thing in Japan called, well, not we, I didn't do this. They have this thing in Japan called service overtime. Okay, service overtime is usually unpaid. This amalgamates a whole bunch of things from take your paperwork home because you didn't finish it on time, to you are forced to go out drinking with your boss. And I mean that literally. You are forced to go out and drink with your boss for 7 hours. Okay? Often missing this. Yes, you're all cringing at 7 hours. I'm not kidding. Okay? You are often doing meetings during that time, so actual work is occurring unpaid. Your meal might be compensated. Might be. Okay? So what the dynamic that's forming here is you have stats pointing in opposite directions about how much work is being done, but what's really happening is they're hiding it. All right, in service overtime. Okay, so now how bad is the problem actually getting? You'll notice a big spike after 1999. All right, Y2K just did something, I guess. Okay, and in red you have the suicides and attempted suicides and stroke and heart failures in purple. Hit. All right, this separates the suicides and the just straight up deaths from stroke or whatever. As well, you will also see a spike here. Notice that it does not really go down. I guess a little bit. A little. And these are only the official reported ones that are deemed officially cleared as it was caused by overwork. All right, yeah. What's the gray? What gray? This is the suicides.
Oh, and the red.
And the red is just deaths. So heart attacks and strokes, suicides. Yeah. Go ahead. All right, so what do the activists say who work with these people? They call complete and utter shenanigans. All right. Just a couple data points. So the National Defense Council for Victims of Karoshi, which I believe still exists now and is one of the most active lawyer groups working on these things to give families, especially widows, because most of the deaths are among men until about 1995, when everybody gets to do this. Yay. Okay. So according to them, just this one organization, which I believe is based in Tokyo or Osaka, all right, in a 3-year period, got 2,000 reports of karoshi. Back up, please. Notice that there's not even 200 on the list. So we're off by an order of 10 already. Go ahead. Okay. Same organization, another lawyer. 10,000 people a year die from karoshi. Please. No, back up again. Okay. So, all right, go ahead. Click twice now. Oh, I'm sorry. One more data point on that last slide. My bad. All right. So according to the OECD, about 22% of employees are working 50+ hours per week. Hit it, please. This shows you that across several countries. South Korea is actually doing their best to outdo Japan on this front now. All right. Working really hard. I think this is 2016 data from the ILO, International Labor Organization. So, like, it isn't actually getting better. What's getting better is the lying about it is getting better. All right. Work levels are not declining on average. Go ahead. So here's a story, the most recent that I'm aware of, big national scandal of a woman who took her own life from overwork. So that is Takahashi Matsuri with her mother. Her mother has been one of the most active people advocating not only for her case to be recognized successfully, but also that like another parent doesn't have to go through this, because a lot of young people are passing, which means that parents are having to bury their kids. That's not fun, all right, at all. And it's horrible that this is so widespread. So the basics of her story, just to be aware of the clock, I'll go through this quickly. So you can notice she's not very old. She's in her 20s, okay? She works for the largest advertising giant, Dentsu. All right, and advertising, banking, and finance, and manufacturing are your worst offenders here. We've also found some data, here and there on teachers getting worked to death, literally, and bus drivers and taxi drivers and truck drivers are also very common industries where you're going to see this problem. Okay, so anyway, she logs literally hundreds of hours of overtime for multiple months in a row. She'll report to her, I believe her mother or her friend, that she's sleeping less than 10 hours a week right before she does this. Okay, so then she takes her own life. Dentsu is found guilty of doing this. They are fined $4,400. Okay, that's the penalty. That's the biggest penalty that should be formally given for violating the labor agreement, which is technically what happened. Yeah, Rohan?
Is it service overtime? Logging in 100 hours?
I mean, it's all overtime together. The stories I read don't differentiate, because in practice you shouldn't differentiate, right? You should just be paid, right? So, okay, then the Dentsu president takes formal public responsibility for this, and they do a 2-year audit, and they find $22 million of unpaid wages. That's an internal, not publicly vetted audit. Just 2 years, they found $22 million of unpaid wages. What's that over 5 years, children? 100. Okay. What's it over 30 years? More. Let's start controlling for inflation. We're getting into the billions of dollars of stolen wages on top of the health problems that we're talking about. Go ahead. All right. So globally, about 750,000 people are killed from stroke or heart disease in 2016. That's a 30% increase from 2000. All right, related to these things. Okay, according to the WHO, if you work more than 55 hours a week, your risk of stroke, etc., goes up 35%. Okay, so we're talking way beyond that. If you remember that chart I gave up at the beginning. Okay, go ahead. So what's going on here? All right, what's the takeaways? So there's a policy-making problem, because if the official data is wrong, what can policymakers do, even if they are acting in good faith? Which my argument is that they are not acting in good faith. Read my article, you will see my hot takes. Okay, the way that information like this trickles out is that Typically, the government will release some sort of official report. They do the same thing on crime statistics, okay? And I will hand a report, all right, to Anya, who's the reporter from the Asahi newspaper. I will then read this out loud and walk away. That's more or less it. Are there actually samosas? Anyway, so crime data is also all jacked up. This is a structural problem with the way that Japan manages publicly released data. All right. Activists then have to go about proving that their data is more accurate, and everybody hand waves away. No. Hand waves them away by saying, well, you have a smaller data set. It's not as robust as ours. At a certain point, tens of thousands of deaths stacking up each year should say something it has not. All right. Go ahead. All right, so why is this a problem? All right, my hot take is profit motive creates an incentive to lie. All right, just Dentsu probably stole several hundred million, maybe $1 billion in profits by not paying their workers this much, as much as they should be. That alone demonstrates the point, okay? But work to generate more output, even if it is not yielding, is sort of the cycle that we are in. Right? No one's actually taking the time to sit down and think about what we're actually doing. So even if you weren't a belligerent Marxist like me, there's a capitalist argument that this is dumb. And yet, here we are. Okay? The culture of Japan is part of the problem. All right? It's hierarchical, way more hierarchical than we are even in this school. Okay? And has anybody ever read like child abuse data before? Or the stats that say, like, you know, if you were abused as a child, you're more likely to abuse your children. Same premise is going on here. Okay. So this is not going to be broken until that gets dealt with. It's also not going to be broken until work until you drop is culturally shamed, which it is not. Okay. Hit it. Okay. Possible solutions to this. You're going to need a structural intervention. This is obvious. Like, there's no way that institutions in the status quo are going to solve the problem because they are all collectively stuck in the same loop of false consciousness. All right. You could actually give that penalty teeth that I talked about above. Again, $4,400 for killing a 27-year-old girl. Okay. No one goes to jail either. Nobody. Not the manager who pushed her to do that. Not his boss, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. You probably need some sort of cultural shift. That'll take 50 years, though. All right, you probably could do some actual public awareness work that is more than just people die, although Japan really hasn't solved that baseline problem, so they might need to do something more with that. There could be wage floors, etc. One more time. And now the bright side, children. All right, get on low on time. So this is obviously a very dark story about working life, okay? I'm sure also several of you have worked weeks where you put in more than 50 hours. Yes? Go ahead, be honest with yourselves, okay? All right, you need to be real about what that means, is where I'm going. Okay, people could quit in mass. They have not, but they could. Theoretically, Japan has a social safety net, but it just hasn't happened. Clearly, there's enough cultural blockage to that. All right, healthy work-life balance is necessary for y'all to have a fruitful and fulfilling, note I am not saying productive, life. Okay, if output for someone else is the way that you design your day-to-day, you're not happy. Okay. You should also be wary and pay attention to when you feel overwhelmed. That's your body screaming at you. All right, one more. All right, last slide. So the big meta here is that there are fictions we create about what we're doing being worth our time. 11th graders just got told, as all the 11th graders before you have been, that APs are not necessary to get into college. I guarantee you'll all take the test. All right. So, no, do not cheer for that. Okay? But Gavin, our guru of college, just told you you don't need to do it, and yet you shall. This is a fiction. You've imagined that you need to do that labor. That will probably be 100+ hours over the course of a school year. Don't do it. Listen to Gavin. Okay? Anyway, Japan has not had an honest reflection collectively, nationally, about this problem. The last chance they had to do it was in the 70s. They failed there too, because they twisted the question in hand and missed out. But anyway, I know I'm at time at this point, so I'll hold there. Thank you all for listening. Lauren, is there time for question or no? Yeah, there's time. We have time? All right, if there's questions. Josh?